present on item 2, 3, and 4, the 2019-2020 Student Code of Conduct, 2019-2020 Student Handbook, and 2019-2020 Employee Handbook. We attached are the 2018-2019 versions. Those are great templates, and we are currently in progress of getting these 3 books ready for the beginning school year. However, we are waiting on the legislative updates to make sure that all the information we put in these 3 different books are correct. And we also have other action items and other things you guys may take action on between here and the beginning of the school that we want to make sure are accurate in these books. So for right now, we're waiting on guidance from Gallegos to help us with model handbooks that they do proof and very helpful to ensure that all the information is correct.
Once you get the legislative updates and all of that information, we'll be talking about dress code and some of the other items that we need to clarify, make sure that everybody's on the same page, and if we need to change any of the language, we'll be doing that in the next month or 2, or
July and August.
July and August.
Yes, okay. July and August. And I have when I gotten all this information too, and I didn't look at dress code is something we were going to look at. Other employee information with the legislative session, of course, we want to include our employee handbook, but we have separated all 3 books, and Bonnie and I will take a good look at them. Okay. And she does have some information, great information. I was reading through it. It's new to me, but it's concerns from student voice, parent voice, community. She has it all gathered, and she's very helpful in sharing it with me. Okay.
And when do you expect those legislative updates? I know it's
kind
of a broad area right now, but have they given you any indication?
No, they are promising. They're promising a direction. It's just they're not promising a date. Okay. Some should September, November. It is all over the place. Wow. But okay. We will have something in August for you guys to review, and just look. We need to make amendments. I surely think we can, but by the beginning of the school year, we need some kind of guideline to begin the school year.
And I would think, I don't know how we can, if our dress code is going to be impacted at all, we need to have some of that information sooner from a parent standpoint, for shopping purposes and that kind of stuff, because they can't wait till after the school year starts to try to get all those, to meet everything. It's just, it's doubly hard on the parents that way. So whatever of that information we get sooner, that would be better, even if we just simply push that part out. I don't know if that's doable or not.
So typically, we recommend doing it all at once. We certainly can, do that. I would recommend, not making that decision tonight, just based on, I've seen the legislative session, the wash turnaround on that 1st of July, but I've also seen new in October. And so it would give us a little bit of time to get through the month of June into July and see where we go with what, we really got to use that legal wash model, student code of conduct as our guide, and then we then start lining up our student handbooks, following that. And then, of course, employee handbooks also need to be reviewed, based on that as well. But yes, we'll certainly, I think the feedback from, the committee, the student committee and the parent feedback, and the community feedback that Ms. Aaron has received previously is there's not major changes in the dress code recommendation. It's somewhat relaxing of that dress code, and so those will be the things that will bring that information forward as what the committee recommended.
And when you have the changes, will you be able to show either struck through what's changing in the verbiage, or highlighted what's being added, or some way to?
Yeah, we'll do like a red strike through. We'll have it organized so that it's easy to get through. They are pretty big books.
Yeah, we'll use the same procedures that we use for policy.
Strike through.
Yeah, red strike through, and then email language is blue. And then last year, for the student code of conduct, and for your information, we did a side-by-side comparison of the 17, 18, the 18, 19 with a side-by-side comparison columns. So I can help you find that item.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is the board policy CO local food and nutrition management. Ms. Amy Crowley and Adela Freeman Wright.
Good evening, Mrs. Birtle, Dr. Lvisd, and the Board of Trustees. We actually have two items related to our child nutrition program that we'll be going over with you. It's item number 5 and number 6. The first item is related to our school lunch or school meal policy. We currently have a policy, if you'll go up a little bit, Lisa. At the top of the page, right there. No. Sorry, I don't know, can I control it? Okay, so these are comparable district policies, and we'll go ahead and look at the Floresville policy. If you'll notice where it says meal charges here, Floresville caps the number of meals charged on an account that are not paid at 5. Our current policy is that it's unlimited. So what we're recommending to you is that we reevaluate that and consider limiting the number of meals charged on an account that are unpaid to 5, similar to the Floresville policy. We've also provided examples for a couple of other districts. North side, they have it capped, and it's different for your elementary age students versus your secondary schools. The elementary is capped at 5 meals, and then the older students are capped at 1. And this is the Shorts Cibolo Universal City policy. And this is capped at, it's separated for breakfast and lunch, 3 lunches and 3 breakfasts. We're recommending that we cap meals in general at 5 meals charged on the account. Do you have any questions related to this item before we move on to the next?
So 5 meals would be a combination of breakfast or lunch.
And the same all the way through all campuses.
So I think we talked about that. I mean, this is, at the end of the year, these unpaid, I mean, it's a burden on the, from an expense standpoint when we look at it from a budget standpoint.
Correct. The right place for these charges to be paid into is our nutrition fund.
Okay.
If we don't have those meals paid, then any amount due has to be subsidized out of the general fund, which is obviously not something that we ideally would want to do. And currently, at the end of this school year, we're just over $6,000 due on lunch accounts.
And that's a lot of little, I understand there's a couple of larger ones, but a lot of little ones, so that's a lot of bookkeeping, and a lot of calls and that sort of thing. Is there, something we can do for when school starts, and at the secondary level, get their schedules, or primary and intermediate, meet the teacher, making sure that people have the information to sign up for the the little email that says, oh, by the way, you're whatever limit, you're hitting $10 or whatever. I know I've gotten those before. Your balance is going to
That information is currently coming off of Blackboard, so everything that they're getting district-wide is coming from that information that is listed on the registration paper.
Yeah.
So as long as they're putting it on the registration information, that's going out through Blackboard.
Okay. Yeah, but I guess you have to log into it, like I don't know what
Titan or something.
whatever the account is for the.
Titan, they would have to personally, each parent would have to enroll into Titan, but they're still getting those phone calls from the district every Friday, email, text, and phone on Fridays.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, yes, everybody would enroll in the Titan program, and we pass that out at registration as well. So, but we can make sure that that information gets out to the families to where they have the option, but as far as getting them to do it, it's always a challenge.
Yeah, so, hey, $5 and get them, that's all it's about.
So you feel our processes are currently covering the notification piece to allow the parents to know that their students getting up to that limit?
Yes, we do know that they're getting the information through Blackboard, and then not only on Blackboard, but as far as every Friday, we're sending home notes with primary and intermediate parents. And so that way it's going, hopefully it's going from the teacher box to the home, so they're
And
getting it that way as well.
if we're not getting a full meal, what's the backup meal for the students that had forgotten?
It would be the deli meat, cheese, and then they would still get the selection of fruit, vegetable, and milk. So it would still be a reimbursable meal for them.
Okay.
And breakfast wise too.
Breakfast wise, it would be cereal, milk, and fruit.
One of the things that we discussed at our workshop last week, and then I did talk with Ms. Callie today about this, that, you know, by the end of this fiscal year, we do have to cover the, reimburse the 240 account, the child nutrition account out of the general fund. However, kind of going to what Ms. Barker was asking earlier, is we're going to continue to actively seek the opportunity to get those funds reimbursed, and then at that point, if they get reimbursed, then they'll go back into the general fund.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Oh, we can't do that.
Yeah, that's what we did confirm.
So what we cannot do is we cannot leave those balances due on the students' accounts. So they'll start the school year off with a clean slate, which is great. But we would have to manually track that on our end to continue collection efforts and then reimburse the general fund for any amount that have been transferred to the nutrition.
Okay. And those are, we're allowing them to charge just the meal. It's not like, okay, I'm gonna get a bottle of water or a snack or something. We're not allowing any of those things to happen. Just put that back and move on. Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
No,
that
it's only a reimbursable meal.
Okay.
Okay, the next item, number 6, is related to a required price increase. And if you don't mind, can you walk them through the form on how that's calculated, the requirement?
And before you start, because it is kind of confusing, if, Lisa, if you would pull up the document that says 2019-20 price adjustment calculator. It's kind of confusing, so.
And you could probably zoom in a little bit more. There we go. Yes.
Okay. And I agree that it's confusing. Bottom line, what we're having to do is we have to, each year, we're gonna have to put in the monthly number of paid lunches through October, which is where the snapshot of our district goes from. So we have to put in each campus and how many lunches they had for the month of October. And then we have to put in the paid lunch price for both the secondary and the primary and intermediate. And then that's where it calculates what the weighted average price should be at. And so we had to use the one from 2018-19, and then that's where, when we put it in, it'll calculate what the total price increase should be. And the total price increase actually should be 48 cents to be at the required federal price. Because they're basing that off of what the federal reimbursement is. And so the federal reimbursement rate ideally should be at $2.99 per meal, or close to $3, it's at $3 is what the difference should be. But we're sitting at $2.99, so the minimum that we're required to increase without getting any sort of finding through the audit would be the 10 cents. And that's, we can max out at 10 cents for this year. But ultimately, the goal is to still get it at the federal rates.
Over a couple of years.
Over a couple of years, you don't have to do it all
Was
at
it
once.
like a 4 or 5 year period, I think, what we discussed last week?
Said something like that.
Yeah.
If we were to increase 10 cents every year, it would take 4 years to catch up, assuming that the required price did not
Does
change.
not
Right, and there, just for, anybody that wasn't here last week, that pricing, it's not something like, oh, we just feel like we're gonna raise it. It's, from what I understood, was to get money back into buying new refrigerators, doing all of that, because all of those types of equipment and everything comes from that fund as opposed to our general fund. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then, in order, I think, in order to increase that price much more, are we working on getting, different selections and increasing, because, those numbers, they seem a little bit low to me. I don't know exactly what an average, district or school our size would be having in number of meals purchased, but it just seems like it may be a little bit low.
I absolutely agree they're low. I think our numbers overall are extremely low. And when I came in September, that was one of the biggest things that I noticed, is that the participation from the students is very low. So one thing I did do is evaluate the menus, try to look into different items. I've gone to several food shows. And one thing that we did start already was at the intermediate and primary campus in February. We started the second choice, because at one point they only got one option. That was all they could pick. If they didn't like it, they had to bring something from home. So now we're offering a second choice for them every day. And those will change just based on different likes and dislikes from this year that we've noticed. And then the same thing with both junior high and high school this year. We are adding more choices into their menu as well.
Okay. Did you notice that any improvements with that adding that second choice down at the elementary?
Oh, definitely. And the same thing, we saw, within the first 2 months, we saw about a 3% increase, which isn't drastic, but definitely once they get to know it, hopefully there'll be more of them to come in and actually try some of the things that are on the menu.
Yeah.
And we did get some positive feedback at the registration as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, how do you receive feedback outside of registration from parents or students, if it's applicable from students? Do you have a mechanism in place to get that feedback?
No, but I know that I had talked to Jordan, and there is a way that we can run surveys through. So once we implement new menus, we'll be able to do surveys through Blackboard to where we can reach out to students and parents.
Okay. Are you gonna try to implement that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Once we get it. The first 2 weeks of school will be basically on the same menu cycle, just to be able to bring in the items from Labatt. And so then we will transition early part of September to the new school menus. And hopefully those will all be available online as well, through the site now.
But I'm sure that, I would imagine also that you can just look at the end of the day, what kind of, if you have like the same things always left over, then that's not worthwhile.
Definitely not gonna use that one.
Any idea where we are in line with other districts on price per meal?
I'm looking at some of the other districts, we are quite
Below?
below most of the other districts.
But even raising it to 10 cents wouldn't.
We're gonna still be below most other districts.
The reason that we mentioned this last week, the reason we're so far off the 299 is because the district historically has not raised, most districts will raise 5 to 10 cents each year just to stay in line with those USDA guidelines, and the district has not done that in the last multiple years, and so that's why there's a gap now, and that we need to start closing that gap. I will say 2 things. One is Adela came in September and has done an outstanding job. I'd like to commend her for her work. She knew right away, historically, the district has been I'm going to say this wrong, but basically frozen packages, open and put in a warmer and then serve it to kids. And so she has a lot of creative ideas about fresh fruits and vegetables and salads, and being able to bank items for students, and so then bringing a second option. So hopefully we'll really work on increasing the opportunity for kids to have more options. And then to kind of push down to your question is, having supervised child nutrition for a long time, is that many of the items, the menus are planned based on budget cycles back in the summer. Those are turned over to the vendors. Those vendors then order their product. So making a lot of adjustments in the middle of the school year really is very difficult, because you budgeted your product from the very beginning, from the summer, as well as they have as well. And so I think the creativity that Adele brought this year has been really good, and I'm really excited about the things that she's going to be able to do for us.
Thanks for the clarification. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next item would be the HB3 discussion, Dr. Levesque.
This item has been requested by trustees just to be a standing item, and for us to try to talk through some of the issues. I will tell you that since we placed it on the agenda, we received 3 letters from TEA.
That was Friday.
Yes.
Thursday, sorry.
Yes, we placed it on the Thursday, so one doesn't really impact us much, which is the minimum salary schedule. The district is well above the minimum salary schedule.
Except for 3 or 4 long term, I think it
Yes,
was
right.
17, 19, and 20 or something.
Yeah, down to the end. But interesting enough, you know, if I can speak, Mr. Dagier was in a conference on, this really just kind of tells you the things that we've been doing and how fluid it's been. He was in a session by TASB, and he sent me a picture of the document that they were going over, and it was related to it basically said that districts must comply with HB3 by making sure that their compensation models were in their budget they passed. And so he sent that to me, and I said, that's interesting, considering that TASB has been guiding us in every step of the way, and they said for us not to do that. And then later on, I guess a little bit later.
They said they changed their mind after printing the material 24 hours before.
So they printed the material 24 hours before, and they changed their mind. So that's just been one of the things that we've really, you know, it's been a very fluid target. You know, the requirements of the implementation of salary is really that, you know, that there's going to be an increase. We know that. There really has to be a breakdown between the 5-year employees and the remainder of the employees. And then, you know, to really, you know, to give those increases to experienced teachers. So the methodology that TA releases, I'm going to read a couple of highlights here for you because I think it's very interesting. It really talks about estimating the amounts of the methodology based on the latest summary of finances. And so we actually received, Ms. Kelley and I actually received the summary of finances today for 17-18 and 18-19. Key point here is that you have to determine your funding based on 19-20 summary of finances. And so when we open that template today, it's NA. The whole thing is NA. So we've got to do a comparison of 18-19 methodology. The methodology is 18-19 summary of finances to 19-20, and 19-20 is blank. And so it says, in making determinations of funding, again, this is an official TEA memo. In making determinations of funding for the 19-20 school year, school districts and charter schools should make, quote, good faith efforts to estimate funding under HB3 using any readily available data. It further goes on to say, this information should be considered a proxy and does not reflect the final formulas as rules have yet to be adopted. School districts and charter schools are not required to use this information in estimating their funding under HB3. And it ends with, although the agency is providing proxies, the legal responsibility for determining accurate revenue estimates rests with each individual school district and charter school, which should consult their attorneys when making their own estimates of the revenue provided under this bill. So that's what we've been dealing with is, remember we talked about that the people that are going to implement this at the government have not been hired yet by TEA because their job descriptions have not been written yet. And we have a template. We received yet another template today from Omar. But so this is a very fluid thing. So I think with the approach we talked about last week in the budget workshop, moving forward is to be very conservative so that we know we get accurate information moving forward. The idea that the state is rolling out bills and requirements, but yet telling us to make good faith estimates based on proxies is very concerning. And they're telling us to compare 18-19 data to 19-20 data, but yet the 19-20 data comes from the state, which doesn't exist. And so we will continue to monitor this. We received some additional updates today. And so every day is really just kind of a competing factor with the day before. And so I know that's very frustrating. It's very frustrating for us to continue to have to monitor that. Each day we would love to have some other decisions that have been made, but I think we have to take a very conservative approach. And once we get concrete data, then we'll be very aggressive in bringing those information to you. We did, we have confirmed, Mr. Flores has been working with TASB. So, the good thing is that we did our TASB staffing and compensation study, and so we have those models of adjustments that they were already recommending to us. And so we'll continue, because we did that, TASB is, we're in the pipeline for them to help us. And Mr. Flores was in communication with them today. So they know we're on their radar. So as soon as we get the concrete data, running the templates, we'll know what our funding is. Then we'll be able to work with TASB and make those adjustments on our salaries. And we're looking forward to being able to reward our staff.
Thank
Thank you.
We'll move on to discussion and action items, consent agenda items to be approved in one all-encompassing motion. If discussion is desired on a particular item, it will be removed from the consent agenda. The minutes from the May 20, 2019 regular meeting, minutes from the June 4, 2019 special meeting, minutes from June 11, 2019 special meeting, and financials.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I second that motion.
Any discussion? All in favor? Motion passes 6-0. Next item is consider and take possible action on adding Amy Cowley as Chief Financial Officer, excuse me, to the first public Lone Star and an authorized representative.
Ms. Sprinkle, members of the board, I'm recommending Amy Cowley be added as authorized representative of First Public as our new Chief Financial Officer.
So, I have a question, because we had to make this motion a number of times. Do we have to,
Remove.
we do?
Yes, we are.
Is that next? How do we,
That
we
document.
don't remove, we don't have to move?
No, we
to
send
remove.
in a new revised
Okay,
document that I have to sign.
okay.
So we don't have to approve the removal.
So it only gives you, based on that document, it only gives you 3 representatives.
Correct.
So every time we're updating it,
Correct.
it's only 3 current staff.
Correct.
I move to add Amy Cowley as an authorized representative for LVISD to the First Public Lone Star Investment Pool.
I second that motion.
Any discussion? All in favor? Motion passes 6-0. Consider and take possible action on resolution naming Amy Cowley, Chief Financial Officer, as the investment officer for LVISD.
Yes, ma'am. In accordance with board policy CDA local, the board needs to recommend the board naming Amy Cowley as designated as one of the investment officers for LVISD.
I move to designate Amy Cowley, Chief Financial Officer, as investment officer for Livonia Independent School District.
I second that motion.
Any discussion?
So what's the difference between this and the public purchase, just so I understand?
So the investment officer works with, like, Mr. Wilkes in our full investment
Okay,
pool. So the first public is really our day-to-day money that we can pull from.
okay, so 2 different areas, 2
Correct.
different, very good. Thank you.
All in favor? Motion passes 6-0. Next item is board policy, DEC local, compensation and benefits reimbursement leave, upon separation or retirement report. Mr. Flores.
And as Mr. Flores approaches, I know we listed this here, I know we talked about this back in April, the request of another trustee, and we talked about it the other night at the board workshop. And Mr. Hurley has some input that he would like to give based on this conversation in April. He was unable to do this tonight due to work obligations, and so this is not a pressing item tonight. We listed it here in case the board wanted to take action tonight, and I would request that as the discussion moves tonight, if we could hold off on taking action tonight, just to allow Mr. Hurley the opportunity to provide his input. I would respectfully submit that to you. Mr. Flores.
All right, so this part of the policy DEC local deals with, the part we're gonna look at is dealing with the reimbursement upon leave. And leave comes in 2 formats. It's the local and state leave that the district provides to each employee, or employees are coming in with previous state days. I've developed two options here. When we spoke last, there's two options we have, option one and option two. Option one, I think the difference is option one has no benefit for local days or any real benefit for anyone resigning. Option two does have, it does have that benefit. The other thing, in both options, they are capped. There's a maximum that you can't pay out, and for retirees, again, both options are the same. The difference is going to be in the resignation piece. Any questions? I know I'm trying to, I'm forming some words here. With the resignation piece, I know we really don't want to promote resigning. I think that's the piece I guess that's why it's agreed. But option one and two, that's the big difference. Retiree, it's a special thing. Anyone who's retired in the field of education, they deserve some kudos.
I have a question though, because I'm looking at both options and maybe I'm just not looking at this right. So retiring though, if the state leave says none, leave goes with the employee, but if they're retiring, how?
So the state does, the TRS does put some value, depending on which tier you fall into for retirees. And again, this is just dealing with retirees that have less than 5 years of service here in Livonia. I'm sure they've earned them in another district, and I think what we want to be careful is not to pay another district's leave on this end. So that's why we just kind of let that one not go, but we know that TRS will take care of it in some form.
That makes sense, thank you.
Were you able to run the numbers and compare how our previous policy with the different options, how the monetary effect of them?
So I know what the spending was from this year. Currently, we're up to, we still have 7 more TRS 7 forms to process. TRS 7 forms are the official notice of retirement, and the reason we're holding up on those we don't have a number is those employees also work summers, so we really couldn't cut them off in May because their work year extended to June, which is summer school and other things they are doing. What it would have cost us, I couldn't break it down. I'd have the amounts. I couldn't break it down on the information I was picking up. So I know I have the totals. I can tell you the totals from 17-18. That was 15,000. 18-19. So far we're up to 7,000, and that's only 3 people total. If we were to put a cap, like a research this year's for sure. If we were to put a cap on those, we were at 20 days on one employee, and we were over about 40 days combined on both employees. We paid out a lot of days because there is no current cap on it.
So that 7,000 this year that we talked about today, that's related to 3 employees, and there's still
There's still 7 more.
Sorry, 7 more employees left.
So we gotta wait to close them out. We have to wait to close them out at the end of the month, and then we'll be able to get an official count of state days and local days. 2 of them will not qualify just because they don't have the amount of days in their leave bank to be able to qualify for this benefit.
So if we did not take action tonight, does it still, it needs to be approved by July 1st? Does it need to be in line with the contract year?
No, I think we would be safe in doing it in July, just
Before the start of
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
work day?
So TRS year's 7/1. 9/1, sorry, 7/1.
Yeah, I don't see anyone retired in July. We should be real good.
Anything else on that? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other, I know we'll wait on Mr. Hurley's feedback, but is there any other feedback? We've kind of narrowed it down to those 2 options. We can bring those 2 options back. Is there any other?
I would like to understand how a 15-year-old or 15-year service teacher with a district, how the current policy affects them compared to how our other options are affecting it. random 15 or 20-year employee with the district and run the calculations and use something that's already gone last year, just to see what the ramifications for that employee that spent 15 or 20 years with the district, how it affects them.
Currently, do we have a cap on the local?
But it's at a lower dollar amount.
So
Right
you want
after-
to see,
yeah.
like I'm just supposed to come back and just make sure we get this.
Right, after 10 years, after someone works in the Marine for 10 years, there is no cap. You're correct on that. And that goes at the rate of $65 a day for professionals with no limit, and $58 for paraprofessionals.
That's local and state.
Yeah, that's local and, that's state lead. Local is 50 for professionals, and there is a cap on local days for, in all categories.
10 plus.
Right. It's the state days that we're not putting a cap on. And, you know, there's, you could have spent the first 7 years in another district, and you're bringing 35 days plus everything you accumulate here in your 10, 15 years, 5 days a year, and then, you know, if you're healthy and you're lucky and never had to take some time off, and it is a nice little check to depart. But again, I think we're bringing in someone else's state days. TRS also takes some kind of value in it. It all depends on what tier. I wish I could give you a number there, but it depends on which tier you're going to fall into. That depends on what the value is for their days.
My concern with capping it is we have an employee that now we have a new policy in place. They now have 20 days they have to burn because they're going to lose those days based on us capping the amount of days, and then we're hiring a sub for the same dollar amount to bring them into the classroom, and they're not getting a full-time teacher, they're getting a sub during those days. So
Yeah, I think that's a very valid concern, Mr. Daggy, and I think one of the things that we can look at, moving forward, it can be just to clarify on the actual, remember, this is an exhibit that we want to add to the policy so it's transparent, but we'd be happy to look at grandfathering any individuals that are near that, at that time period, that have given that time to the district. We obviously want to do this for budgetary purposes so we can plan better. That's why there's the request of making sure that we have adequate time with the 60 days to make any adjustments in the fiscal year. But we can also look at that, run those numbers based on really just, I guess, listing out those employees and, kind of just, if we have to, just try to draw a line of this would be that natural break. Where you guys, whatever, we'll take guidance from the board on what that is. But if we need to say that anyone that was within 5 years of retiring, then we would grandfather them. And that's very common in school districts that, especially when they go through an outsourcing of, support services like transportation, food service, or anything like that, you make sure that you don't just change all your processes and procedures for those employees. So we could definitely look at that and then make that, those that would be within, whatever break the board would want, and grandfather those individuals in, and then anyone else coming in would then fall into this category, and those would not within that window.
And Mr. Daggy, I'm recalling one employee, a retired teacher from 2017-28 school year, 2018 school year. Their payout was around $6,200. So they would have, and I'm thinking of their years of service here in Livonia, they were over 24. They would have capped out at $4,200 with this new exhibit here. That would have been the max that we could have paid them, and they would have qualified for the $4,200. Last year we paid out, it was $6,200, so that's what we're part about $2,000. And that was the extreme. That was really the extreme. The others are when you look at 10 or more years, you cap out at about $3,000. That seems more in line of what we're paying out right now. But there are those extremes.
Well, I think we should be able to go out and look and say, okay, here's a list of all of our employees on the 5-year increments or whatever, go to the 15 and 20 especially, because 15, you're thinking they may be getting close, and 20, they're closer than not. And being able to say, okay, well, we have this number and their average number of days, or, and see where, if we have some outliers, where there's a lot of days versus, okay, they typically take their days and maybe they'll have 20 at the end. Just to, I think we can estimate, kind of in the future as to what that would look like. Just to give us an idea, we can go back and look at history, but history doesn't mean that's what's gonna happen tomorrow, so I would like to know how many teachers we have and how many do we have that would qualify for however many days and what that impact. We can calculate that
Yeah.
quickly.
Even looking at, because, typically, use your local version and do your states, even if we, didn't have a cap on state per se, for those people that have been teaching longer, I just, you want to draw those master teachers in, keep them. And I know there's a budgeting process and not shooting ourselves in the foot, but at the same time, I don't want to have people say, oh no, I'm not gonna go there because they don't have a good policy to it means something and you're gonna bring people in, it's an incentive to teach and be a master teacher for the long haul.
So we have 4 with 30-plus years right now, 4 teachers. If we can get the days that they have in their bank, we have 13 with 20-plus years. Those are our 2 big groups. The 10-plus years, that is a huge, huge group. And we could definitely look and see how, 53 of those folks, we can see how many days they have in the bank to.
Yeah, I would just like to, I don't read the list of names, or just
Right,
say, okay, we
yeah.
have this, and their average number is however many days, just to be able to quantify a little bit, and say, okay, well, this makes sense, or no, because I don't wanna harm anybody, but I also don't wanna spend more money, than we have to. If we have a policy of however many days on there as a cap, well, most people aren't even gonna be close, then it's a non-issue in my eyes. If there's a couple of people, then, like what that was saying is maybe we go back through and grandfather some things, we make an informed decision.
Thank you.
Next item is the contract for Region 20 commitments. Ms. Turner?
Good evening, Ms. Burkle, Dr. Levette, and trustees. This evening, the Region 20 commitments allow us to receive services that support instruction, our student information system, HR system, our financial system, and many other things like our databases and technology systems that we have in place. We've attached a spreadsheet to this as well, and on that spreadsheet, I have broken down all the different commitments that we have agreed to and are looking to redo for the 1920 school year. It also shows the instructional impact or the relevance to that department and how it's going to impact Lvisd. Do you have any questions about the Region 20 commitments?
So I've heard a number of times that the softwares that we're currently using are antiquated and don't talk well with each other. So there's numerous data entry just type personnel that are needed to duplicate that information in different systems. And there's always a chance for human error. By approving this for another year right now, does that hinder us from being able to change softwares or look at different options moving forward?
Well, reviewing the systems that we have in place, like for instance, our Texas system, that is our student information system, they are actually going through an overhaul, and so the grade book is going to appear and look different, and it's going to be more user-friendly. A lot of their API components are also going to be able to lead us towards an online registration system as well. So while they're changing, we're also looking at how they're changing and if they're going to impact us in a positive way so that we can also evolve and get the right software in place.
So it's not like we're locked into version 12 and they're moving to version 14. We're getting version 14
Correct.
Access and, okay.
And I would also say you're exactly right. And the Service Center has been, I would say, somewhat receptive to our feedback and trying to bridge those gaps. Part of the problem is the software programs that we have right now that they support, they're just antiquated. And so that's one of the things that they're committing to all the districts moving forward, is that with all of these upgrades, that will take care of itself. I will tell you that there is a software program out there that is well ahead of what these programs do. That's what we'd like to see what happens with Texas once the Region 20 starts rolling theirs out. It is really an 18-month, no less than 14-month, but it's really an 18-month implementation of a new SIS because of districts, because you really want to run them in parallel to make sure there's no errors. My prior district, the first year we had to, the program at the time was going away, and so we did a 6-month implementation, and that software program never survived, not only in our district, but it never survived the state of Texas, because they were the big vendor that came in and replaced that former program that basically went away. And so shortly after about a 3-year commitment to that program, we went to a different software program, and we ran in parallel for 1 year to make sure, and we had some schools also run it. We just want to make sure, the data itself is too important to not do right. The state gets funding, the state funds schools based on that PINS data, as well as, you don't want to mess around with student records and record keeping. And so, any new software program, this would be what we recommend going into next year. Hopefully Region 20 will improve their product as they've committed. If not, then we will start a task force looking at other products that will better serve our district.
So what are other options outside of using Region 20? We can use any vendor?
Yeah, so the state has approved a vendor, and then of course you have to put out an RFP for that, and then you open it up, obviously, close bids, and then go through the process, open bids, and go through the process of that, and evaluate the program. That typically you've got a lot of end users. Our committee, when we did that, we had students, parents, registrars, administrators, teachers. We had a committee of about 60 people that was on that were on that product, task force that really recommended the product. And so, hopefully, we were in this room and had some really difficult conversations with Region 20 because we had lots of our program. Some of our, just our career advising program was not talking to our student, our SIS. And so a lot of our staff had to do a lot of manual labor for that. So career advising was one thing, but we have HR and business modules that don't talk like they should. We have student modules that don't talk well with our business modules. So really just trying to, if you remember from our TASB staffing, that's actually one of the findings that they found, and they actually suggested a consideration of a different product that does not require so many manual labor hours. And that was a pretty standard thing, what they shared with us, and they shared the night that we had our workshop with them, is that's a pretty standard comment that they put in that study based on districts that use Texas. And so we're really hopeful that Region 20 has made a lot of progress. They've been very receptive to some of the things that we've tried to do in HR with some of our PMIS, our position management. So we're hopeful that continues to be improved.
So you've reviewed all of these softwares and they are needed by the district?
Correct. A lot of them are instructional pieces that we use. For instance, the Brain Clock database, that's one with the videos for our classrooms. And if you'll notice on that Brain Clock, we actually removed the access at the high school level. We reviewed the analytics. I reviewed that with Ms. Burris, and we noticed that they only had a total of 15 sign-ins this school year. It wasn't worth our dollars to spend it there, so we did remove that component from the high school level. But everything else we did review as well. We looked at all the analytics to ensure that we were getting the best bang for our buck on that.
And some of the software, and I would say when I visit with Ms. Turner about making sure that we did what we just asked for today, there were some software programs that we were paying for that we were not using. And so that software, that work is no longer, we have improved products, we're going to make sure that a lesser cost.
So you'll, at the end of the spreadsheet, you'll notice that there were some significant changes in pricing just from one school year to the next. At the very bottom, we did have a product in place that we were using both as an NTM solution, which is our mobile device management solution for our iPads, and then a different solution for our Chromebooks and a different solution for our desktops. So we're streamlining that into 2 products as opposed to 3, so we are able to save money on that aspect as well.
Yeah, and I did notice where the budget was reduced, so I was curious what happened, so I appreciate the work there to reduce the budget. But it's still going to be effective across the board, not losing anything.
Correct.
So this is a one-time expense, is that the way I understand it?
This is an annual expense.
Annual expense, hey, these are the ones that we want to support during this next
Correct,
year, here's the cost assessment.
correct.
It's not a use, it's not per use, it's locked in.
Correct, this is our access for this coming school year, so every single one of our students will have access to all the databases that are listed there. Same thing, all the student data will be in Texas for our SIS.
Thank you.
And, typically we try to bring this discussion item, the discussion item is basically we're evaluating the software, so the service center, once they get their contracts in place, it's going to be the school year, they get their commitments based on the number of districts that are going to participate. So they sent us a survey early on, would you participate, would you not, because they're paying for this product, and so some of the cost of the product is then spread across other number of districts. So that's why we're getting this now as an action item, because by the time we receive that, we already have our label, and so that's why we're getting this action. It is a July one.
And this isn't all-inclusive of every software we use. These are just the ones that are serviced by Region 20.
Correct.
I move to approve the Region 20 commitments for 2019-2020 as presented.
I second that motion.
Any discussion? All in favor? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It is 7:59, and we'll be moving to closed session. Pursuant to Texas Government Code 5510701, private consultation with the U.S. Attorney, pursuant to Texas Government Code 5510704, discussion with personnel including 2019-2020 probationary contracts pursuant to Texas Government Code 5510704, deliberation and discussion regarding evaluation of superintendent, pursuant to